Are we ready to roll? How's everybody doing? Hey, you guys are like a true bundle of energy out there. We're going to have to do something to amp this up.
It's the afternoon sleepiness.
Oh, that's right, the 3:30 time slot. Okay, so we're going to just go ahead and get kicked off. My name is Willy Sennott. I'm the EVP of FinOps at Vega. Just a quick little history. I started my career as a CPA and auditor. Don't blame me for that. And then transitioned into running strategic planning and predictive analytics practices at a publicly traded firm, and then started working for a managed service provider in 2014, where I built a FinOps practice before it was a FinOps practice. So cloud cost optimization, cloud economics. That's now FinOps. So I'm approaching 10 years in this space. Super excited, relatively passionate about it.
Nice. I am Janel Jensen. I'm the director of FinOps at Vega Cloud. I started off, I'm actually at my 10-year mark in the cloud. I started off at a managed service provider as an accounting manager. And I also have a data warehouse background. So what I was able to do as an accounting manager, I was able to leverage the cloud billing data to automate accruals, invoice uploads into the ERP system, and really loved working with the data. So then it was just a natural transition into cloud economics, and then now here at FinOps.
It took me 2 years to recruit her out of the finance department, but I finally won. Okay, we're going to talk real quick about Vega Cloud. Then we're going to go, really how our enterprise is challenging. We're going to give you some maneuvers on how to overcome those challenges, and then we'll tell you where you can find us later. So Vega Cloud it's a multi-cloud FinOps platform, and if you really think about it, it's a custom-built platform, purpose-built by FinOps practitioners for FinOps practitioners. That's all I'm really going to go into now, and you can find us later, and we'll go into much deeper detail for you. Love to see all of your smiling faces with a whole bunch of energy.
Okay, so we are talking large enterprise organizations. So coordinating between teams on these large enterprises can be very difficult. Thinking of large enterprises, how are they built? Through mergers, through acquisitions. So then you have all these disparate teams across the globe. You can have your dev team on one continent, your finance team on another continent. So coordinating between teams can be quite a challenge. So understanding that and addressing it is one way you're going to be successful in your cloud journey.
And the other major challenge, right, in a large enterprise, everything is more complex. There's more data sources that you're dealing with. There's more teams. There's more stakeholders. Everybody's in a different place in their cloud maturity journey. And trying to get action achieved in those environments is even much harder. Every survey that FinOps.org has done, the #1 challenge is really about getting engineers to take action. And it's even harder in a large enterprise. The other portion of my background that I forgot to mention that's actually come into play more often than not is I bartended for 10 years. So, in this space, it's really out there talking to these teams, being comfortable, learning about them, engaging with them is a skill that I never thought would be associated with FinOps. Every chance I get. On a side note, there's applications out there where you can track your beers, and gamification of beer drinking has almost ruined my life, but it's another story.
Okay, so we are going to cover a couple different areas today, and we're just scratching the surface. We can go on for days and days, so we're just touching the highlights. So if there's things we don't address today, please come find us afterwards, and we would love to have additional conversations. The first area we want to talk about is understanding and optimizing costs. First thing you need to do is ensure there's education on cloud services. When your engineers are in the consoles and the portals and they're making choices, they do not see the cost implications of the choices they are making. And let me expand upon that. Not all regions are created equal. Development teams, they don't necessarily understand some regions are more expensive than other regions. And so providing them with that education, and if there's not a business need to not utilize that more expensive region, then let's keep those costs down from the very beginning rather than having to change it later. As well as think about the cloud providers are constantly rolling out new virtual machine types. Making sure you're leveraging the most current versions. Make sure you're leveraging the less expensive disks attached to your volumes. So just having that education for your developers are going to keep your optimization costs maximized.
And you know, the larger the enterprise, the more data you're dealing with, the different types of disparate data that you're going to be dealing with. And really, FinOps at the end of the day is a data-driven exercise. The more data you can get your hands on, the better you're going to be at your job. And uncovering those places that may be having hidden data. So if you think about, you've got your CSP providers, right? You're getting your cloud billing data. Maybe you're leveraging an observability tool. And then there's the data that oftentimes people don't even think about, and it's the data that is internal to your enterprise or your organization, and that's the only place it exists. And it could be how teams are rolled up, how things are aggregated from a cost and budgeting standpoint. Sometimes, you know, inside of individual teams, they may not use, you know, good, clean application tagging, but they bury it inside of the resource name. So there's gold in there, and you need to figure out how to get it out.
Monitoring and evaluation. So the first bullet point here is talking about KPIs. You can have so many KPIs, and effective KPIs are going to help you really evaluate how effective you are in actioning your cost optimization opportunities. And you can have KPIs for every persona. But the one I really want to dive into here momentarily is the intelligent anomaly detection. How many times have you turned on anomaly detection and you just get inundated with all these notifications that are meaningless? So after a while, you receive so many of them, you start tuning them out. So by taking an intelligent approach to anomaly detection, get your logic correct first before you turn on your notifications, then you're going to be able to ensure you're actioning those notifications timely. As an example, I met with a team on Monday that's primarily in GCP. They received a notification on Friday, and because they're not having to worry about all this noise in the background, they were able to action it quickly. Turns out they rolled out some new dashboards in GCP and had some big query analysis they had to do some fine-tuning on. And so by the time we met on Monday, after receiving their notification on Friday, the costs were already back down and stabilized.
And you know, the enemy of all of us in the FinOps world, in my mind, is analysis paralysis. There's more data, you give them the data, the teams get the data, and they hem and they haw, and they recede into the thing I like to call the excuse factory of all the different reasons why they can't take advantage of the offerings, right? And they just want to analyze, analyze, and analyze. And the challenge is getting them to move. And if you flip it on its head a little bit and you start reporting on the cost of inaction over time, the numbers get real big, real fast, and it can encourage them to move. And again, that's where sort of my bartending experience has come into play, is that when you're talking to people, getting them to move out of their comfort zone and just not being focused on the data so they don't move is incredibly key.
Gamification is a game changer. If you are not
I like how you did that.
Oh, it is a game changer. Vega has a program called Cloud Heroes, and we've been working on this program, and we've had to implement it across multiple clients for a while now. And what we do with our Cloud Hero program is we recognize individuals within an organization, a new individual each month, and celebrate their wins in the cloud. Cost optimization, implementation of FinOps best practices. They're the cloud hero. And what's great about that is it creates a snowball effect. It creates this momentum for additional cost savings because, oh, hey, Bob over here got recognized, and this team sees that. They see they're being recognized by the C-levels. They're getting emails directly from the executives celebrating their wins, and it creates that snowball effect. I was working with a gentleman last week who was our cloud hero for this specific company 2-3 months ago. I think he may be the cloud hero again this month because he is going gangbusters. Effective communication, especially on these large enterprise organizations, and with all the disparate teams across the globe, you need to have effective communication. You need to understand for each of the teams short-term, mid-term, and long-term objectives because that is going to change your strategy in how you're doing committed use discounts, on your negotiations with cloud providers. Effective communication is key. Not only that, be a partner, be an advocate. Don't be a dictator, because when developing that trust and that relationship through that effective communication, that's going to drive further action.
And then, you know, the other thing is one size does not fit all. It's great that we have a bunch of data And sometimes you can get caught up in you're working with teams and you're trying to get them to move, and you have your data and you have your algorithms and you're convinced it's the right answer because you have the data, right? Well, sometimes there's more to it. And it's trying to go in and be creative. And you might think that you have something, for example, on AWS, in their fully managed solutions, Graviton is a bit of an easier lift than on the non-fully managed solutions. And when you engage with teams, they may just go to you and say, hey, we can't do that. Well, it's going to that next layer of conversation and saying, well, why can't you do that? And then what you uncover is, oh, because my RDS is running on too dated of a version of MySQL. And so that's like, hey, well, let's talk about that. And trying to get them to go down the road and not just drop it in a lap and say, why didn't you guys do this? Understanding and ferreting out those reasons will really help you in a large organization. And the challenge in the bigger the organization is there's so many disparate groups that have different challenges internally, and trying to figure out how to be a partner with those, like Janel mentioned, it will really help you be more successful. Corporate governance. Everybody loves corporate governance, don't they? All right, this is an area, so sometimes one of the things I think that's a challenge for internal FinOps teams is, in the dark secrets of people's minds, you're going to get painted with the internal audit brush, which isn't good for anybody, right? So it's trying to figure out how to go beyond that, and as soon as you say corporate governance, a lot of teams will shut down, especially in large enterprises that have been built through acquisition. Depending on which group was larger or how many groups are in there, they're relatively resistant to corporate governance. But at the end of the day, if you begin with the end in mind, like what are you trying to get to? Corporate governance is really key, and some of it is just trying to help build the corporate governance, but then how do you communicate it out to the teams and get past those resistance points?
Committed use discounts at the corporate level. I can talk about committed use discounts for a month straight and not get bored with it.
She really can.
So regardless of the cloud, savings plans, RIs, committed use discounts, leveraging committed use discounts at the corporate level, leveraging those economies of scales, that's where you're going to really recognize real savings. We have a large media and entertainment client that we work with that originally had 13 master payer accounts in AWS. After consolidating those master payer accounts and through leveraging the economies of scale, through the communications with the teams, understanding what they're doing, their savings plans coverage for their EC2 instances is currently at about 95%. Last year, saving them $30 million of just savings plans. So managing at the corporate level, that's where you're really going to maximize those savings, and then also understanding the differences between the different committed use discount opportunities that are out there. How flexible are they? How inflexible are they? Having de-risking mechanisms in place. Managing. You have to manage your committed use discounts. You can't just purchase them and forget about them. You have to constantly evaluate, monitor for expiring committed use discounts. You have to manage them at that corporate level to really maximize those savings.
And the other benefit, right, is that when you have multiple teams trying to manage this, each one of them has their own risk persona or risk profile, and those actually get in the way of an optimal solution, right? So having a single group that manages at a higher level will really get you to the deeper discounts. And then we've got stakeholder engagement. In the larger enterprise, one of the challenges is, I think, as a FinOps professional, and especially as somebody who's maybe new in an organization trying to build a FinOps practice, is trying to navigate the landscape of, I need to talk to an application team or an engineer, and then I need to figure out how to talk to the finance teams. And at some point, you may get the opportunity to engage with the C-level. Every one of those is a different conversation. So as you go along the way, trying to build the skill set, talk to others in the organization, especially if you're younger in your career and you're not necessarily comfortable talking at that levels, but you certainly want to, right? Because the exposure is great. Leverage peers inside your organization to figure out how to have those conversations. Because when you have them, they're fun because one, you get exposure, and two, you can make a big difference.
Automation, automation, automation. Depending on where you're at in the FinOps process, whether you're crawl, walk, or run, automation is going to be key to ensure your costs remain down. As an example, Your snapshots, think of snapshots. You've got snapshots in all 3 clouds. Yeah, they build over time. You got to go in. They are aged, so you got to go delete them. Well, let's implement some lifecycle policies. Object storage, let's implement lifecycle policies, intelligent tiering. Auto parking, oh, for the love, please auto park your non-production resources. And if you don't have a tool, call me. I will hook you up. But automate where you can, because that's going to keep your costs down, and you're not having to go back in there and manually action it.
And the other thing that is, I'm never shocked, I would say, over sort of our experience, we've worked inside of many large enterprises, and there's unfortunately a bit of a consistent theme, especially those enterprises that have been built through acquisitions along the way, is that you have one team that may be really advanced, and they've already tackled some of the harder things inside the FinOps world, right? So let's say they're in the run phase. And then you have another team that is in the walk phase, encouraging them to actually talk to their cohorts inside of their organization will get you there much faster. Because otherwise what you end up is this team is going through the pain of walk all on their own. All the risk averse items are in there. They need to learn all these things. Well, what if this doesn't work? What if this doesn't work? When in reality, they have people inside their organization that have already done that and tested it and can give them firsthand experience as to why that's not a big issue, right? So connecting those dots and trying to turn a large enterprise into the classic beehive, what one bee knows, they all knows, is really important. And it's a tough thing to do, and it takes time to break down those walls.
We talk fast.
We do talk, look, we got, that countdown timer is kind of freaky, by the way. All right, questions?
You guys did an amazing job. I'm going to walk around with the mic so you can ask the question. I was told to avoid going to the front and then have the speaker repeat it. So 1 second, I'm coming.
What? We were told to stand together.
Thanks for the presentation. I love the cost of inaction. Do you actually show this back to the organization? Do you have a ranking or something like that? How do you track that?
Well, so here's all, yes, and yes, right? So the challenge is always, look, there's multiple ways that you can show data back in an organization. So think about the carrot and the stick, right? And it used to just be sticks, right? And now if you think about the gamification, we mentioned Cloud Heroes, there's other providers out there that have similar type of programs, right? Where you're trying to recognize the positive. The cost of inaction one, I have a tendency to go to that when the movement isn't happening, right? And showing them that, because sometimes people don't realize, the other thing is, look, time moves fast. You wake up and you realize it's been 3 months that you said you were going to shut down that resource, but you were still doing your research. But over that time, still giving those cloud providers those dollars, like they need anymore. So, it's a really effective tool building that. And it's just, look, it's the same data. You're just flipping it on its head. I apologize to the cloud providers out there. You need lots of money.
You had mentioned something about auto parking and saying you've got to have a tool like this. Can you just talk a little bit about trying to get something like that implemented? The auto part of parking in particular is what caught my attention.
Yeah, for sure. So look, there's solutions that have been out there for a while. If you think Park My Cloud, I think they were like the first leader in the space. You've got tooling that you can use internal at an organization. There's lots of providers. We have one. With the whole idea is using, I'm going to step back a little bit. So oftentimes I hear this conversation around, well, the cloud is more expensive. And I cannot help myself every time I hear it, because my answer is, well, then you're not doing it right. That's just sort of where I exist, right? Is that the idea that I can not pay for something when I'm not using it is fantastic. So I should do that. Sometimes you go into an organization, I've seen this time and time again, you consume their billing data and you look at their usage on an hourly basis and it's flat. And my first reaction is, you're not really in the cloud, you're just in somebody else's data center at that point, right? You should be leveraging the cloud to see those spikiness of the utilization. So there's several tools that are out there that can help you do the auto parking, and just also leveraging data, because everybody will go straight to the excuse factory box of, no, my dev teams work around the clock, right? Absolutely. What's really handy is when you have a chart and a graph that shows them exactly when they're using it, and you put it in front of them and you go, so show me when you're using it? I mean, not to be painful about it, but sometimes you got to get to there and go, no, just help me understand when you're using it. And especially if they know you're going to take that same data and show it to somebody else a little bit higher up the responsibility chain, sometimes that's the way you get to the action.
And sometimes those conversations, yeah, maybe they are using it, but the metrics are showing that low utilization because it's over provision. So then it's a different conversation.
Yeah, so it's exactly the point, right? Is that it's not always one size fits all. Okay, so maybe you can't auto park it, but do you really have to have that much, provisioning there? Let's go to the next conversation. Again, just don't give up at the first sign of a pushback. I'll stop calling it an excuse because sometimes it's real. Anyone else?
I have a question for you. You have a lot of capabilities listed up there. I get the question a lot, like, which one do you start with? So is that different for everybody that you work with, or do you have a recommended path or hierarchy?
So honestly, I think it always starts with the data. That's my personal opinion, right? Taking the time to get that foundational items in place so that you have something to work from. Crawl, walk, run. I've seen people sometimes try to run before they can crawl. And you got to go through and set up. You build the foundation, makes it much easier to build that third floor and put those windows in when they're not going to fall right out. What's your take on that?
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, it's a data exercise. So each team, each group that you work with, they have a different mix of services. And so depending on what they're spending their money on is where you're going to really drive your conversation. The team I was talking about that I met with on Monday that's in GCP, 85% of their spend is in BigQuery. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time optimizing virtual machines or object storage where the real meat and potatoes is in BigQuery for them.
So if I'm a brand new FinOps practitioner, right, it doesn't matter the size of the organization. The first thing I'm going to do, maybe internally I'm going to be thinking about the data, but then I got to start building relationships, right? Letting people know. You get, because first time you show up and you're going to talk to people about their costs, again, you don't want them painting with that internal audit brush. And then you have the lovely conversations. One of my all-time personal favorites is walking into a group and showing them that, we could save them money, and they go, but if you lower my costs, I'll never get that budget back. And the finance person in me about threw up a little bit, say, well, let's reframe this conversation. What if I could show you how to use that same budget to drive more revenue, build more of those things that you want to do that maybe you've had constraints on? So let's, again, change the conversation for the audience and make it more positive to achieve their business outcomes. Befriend them.
I'd be curious to just hear a little bit deeper into the committed use discount purchasing at the corporate level. Like, so are we talking about buying savings plans for the master payer, or
Yeah.
account level? How does that?
So it can be kind of a mix. So let's talk compute savings plans in AWS for a quick moment. So generally, yes, it's going to be you're going to evaluate all usage underneath the master payer account. But then what you want to do is you also want to evaluate coverage across different teams as well. Because the way AWS applies the compute savings plans, it's going to be applied based off of the highest savings percentage first. So most teams anymore are running Linux. But if you're a team and you're primarily running Windows, then you're not going to get much coverage from that savings plan. So I would say 95% of the savings plan purchases are generally going to be at that master payer account, but you can do targeted purchases within linked accounts so you can drive savings for specific teams.
How do you incentivize the teams then, the more mature teams that are on top of their stuff, right, and they're buying savings plans versus those that aren't, right? So if you're managing it at the corporate level, are you not kind of de-incentivizing the more mature ones?
No, I don't think so, right? Because if you basically just take that out of their hands, right, and you manage it at the corporate level. So if you think, I think about the difference between rate and usage, right? So rate conversations, in my mind, committed use discounts, negotiating with CSPs is done at a high level. You get the power of scale. And then you get the teams just focusing on usage. It's one last thing. They're not finance experts. Let them do what they do, focusing on refactoring, making sure they've got right sizing in there, all the things that are more technical in nature, keep them focused on that because not everybody's a finance expert.
Thanks.
And then to expand upon that real quick as well,
We're 0-0,
we're
but
zero.
go ahead.
I'm gonna do it anyways. So to expand upon that as well, our software, we have a committed use tab within our Vega Inform, where each team, they can go in to see for every single product that's coverable what their savings rate is. So when we meet with them on a regular basis to go over all their savings opportunities, what their spend's doing, what's their future goals and plans, we also review committed use discounts, because that allows us to, that way they have involvement in the conversation. They may not be purchasing it, and if there's any upfront fee, that risk is all at the corporate level. And so there's a lot of benefit to them, and so helping them understand that and understand their coverage for their individual groups is key.
And if you want to find out more, you can find us in our booth here where we go. All right?
Awesome.
So we're just out there. We'd love to see as many of you can. If you've got more questions, please don't hesitate to find us. I'm easy to find in this shirt. So.
Meet and connect.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you both. So great.
Thanks for watching that session. I'm sitting here in San Diego right after FinOps X. We hope you join us next year here live 2024. In the meantime, please subscribe to the channel and join the community. Get involved, join the summits, get in a working group, and don't forget to get FinOps certified. Because next year here in San Diego for FinOps X, it's going to be twice as big. Come join the party. Come meet your people. Welcome home.